Yeah, I'm gonna need at least 5 more of these because this is how you make a Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man Brand New Day is the 4th installment in the Tom Holland Spider-Man series, this time directed by Destin Daniel Cretton. It picks up 4 years after the events of No Way Home, where we saw Peter tragically leave his old life behind, as he was forced to make everyone forget about him, even those that mattered most to him. In this movie, we see Peter more alone and isolated than ever, as he also has to deal with some pretty wild new powers. He also has to deal with a new telepathic enemy that poses a threat to the entire city. This is one of the most emotionally impactful Spider-Man movies to date, but that doesn't mean it also isn't a really fun time. Also, this is a spoiler review, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, maybe get out of here. Let's begin by talking about the main man himself, Spider-Man / Peter Parker. Tom Holland once again kills it in the role, and I think at this point he might be the definitive Spider-Man. He's as fun and as quippy as ever when he's in the suit, and he also performs really well with the more emotional moments. Like that one scene where he thinks MJ remembers him, and he just breaks down in relief. Between the last 2 movies, we've really seen Spider-Man become his own hero. We're at the point where he's more independent now than ever before. He's living on his own and he's not backed by Stark Tech anymore. And also, his closest relationships are ones where people only know him as Spider-Man. He's truly prioritized this part of his life over everything else. We see him ignore the things that he needs as Peter Parker. He's very closed off in this movie. For example, in that one scene where that girl who lives in his building tries to make conversation with him about how they live on the same floor, and he just gives her a really dry response. But you get why Peter is like this, because the last time he got close to people, it didn't end well. I was able to really feel for Peter in the scenes where he misses Ned and MJ, and as a viewer, seeing them all hang out as friends is something I began to miss. But despite the hardships Peter faces, he never once hesitates being the hero that the city needs because that's his responsibility. Let's talk more about Peter's isolation in this movie. The bottled up feelings he experiences rise to the top when he goes to Ned and MJ's party and he sees how MJ is now with someone else. Peter can't deal with this, he doesn't know how to react, so he just leaves, and he swings home. And when he gets home, he immediately faints. The pain and stress that Peter experiences triggers his new powers as they cause a surge in his arachnid-related hormones. But also, Peter passing out like this represents how if someone doesn't properly acknowledge and deal with the problems they're facing, and instead they suppress their feelings, those feelings are only going to grow and materialize in ways they may not have foreseen. Anyway, Peter wakes up in a web cocoon and he realizes that he has new powers. He's got organic webbing, he's got better reflexes, and he's stronger than ever. In a way, it symbolizes how the Spider-Man side of his life has completely taken over. But these are powers that Peter doesn't want, and they're powers that we see him struggle to use. Like in the scene where he's on a rooftop and he tries to use his organic webbing. I like that scene because it reminded me of Tobey's Spider-Man trying to use his powers in Spider-Man 1.
Up and away, Web!
But as the movie goes on, we see Peter's mindset change. He comes to the realization that his current ways of life aren't doing him any favors, and during his fight with the Hand, who Jean Grey is mind controlling, Jean asks him if he's Peter Parker or Spider-Man, and he says both. Peter is more in control of his new powers than ever before, because he's finally accepting them, he's finally embracing these new abilities. In this moment, Peter decides he's going to make the most out of who he is as Spider-Man and Peter Parker. And this is also exemplified by the way he goes out of his way to form bonds with people at the end of the movie, like when he goes to say hi to Ned. I think they told an inspiring story here about not ignoring the different parts of who you are and the importance of not being alone. And as someone invested in the character, seeing him go on this personal journey was really satisfying to watch. So let's talk about the action in this movie, which has some serious sauce. And it makes sense because Destin Daniel Cretton also directed Shang-Chi, which has some of the best choreography out of any MCU movie. The action in this movie just has so much more personality than that of the other Tom Holland movies. You can really tell they took inspiration from the Insomniac games with how Spider-Man does his takedowns. One particular scene that comes to mind is the one where he fights the damage control security. They used just the right amount of slow motion to enhance the scene without overdoing it. In this movie, Spider-Man really jumps around New York. It really feels like his playground. And as much as I like the other Holland movies, You don't get that vibe as much as you do in this movie. So let's talk about the Hulk sequence. It takes place in the damage control building, where we see that Jean Grey has taken control of Banner, and he's changed into his Professor Hulk form. Even the part of the sequence where Spider-Man's fighting Professor Hulk is fun to watch. And I like how Punisher gets involved. Seeing this maniac try to take on a version of the Hulk with grenades and guns is really fun. But eventually the Beast gets woken up and we see Banner go full Savage Hulk mode. And it's about time. We get some classic Hulk action. We even see him do his classic Hulk clap, which sends Spidey flying. Maybe it would have been nice to get a little bit more Hulk, considering it had been so long since we last saw him, but the movie really didn't call for any more Savage Hulk, so I can't really complain. Another big highlight in terms of the action is the scene where Spider-Man takes on the Hand. You get some big effects with how Peter unleashes his big-ass web tornado, and some of the weapons the Hand uses, but there's a bit more rawness to this scene compared to other action sequences. You get some hand-to-hand combat, and overall it's just a bit more gritty. And like I mentioned before, this action sequence also provides a satisfying turning point for Peter. So let's talk a bit about the supporting villains in this movie. First up, we got Michael Mando finally returning as Mac Gargan, and he's finally the Scorpion. And I think they utilized him okay as a secondary villain. Kinda similar to Hulk. It had been so long since we last saw the character that I would have liked to have seen him a bit more. The door is still open for him to return at some point, maybe in a potential Sinister Six team, but who knows. But I really like the scene where Peter loses control of his new powers, and he goes apeshit on Scorpion when he's taken over by Jean. We get a little hint at what Bully Holland could look like. We also get an entire montage of Spider-Man taking on villains. We get cameos from Boomerang, Tarantula, and Ramrod. But these are all very quick cameos. They're barely in the movie. But I also don't really mind that because villains briefly popping up for quick cameos just makes the movie feel more like a comic book. But I already know the Ramrod fanbase is pissed over his lack of screen time. But what are you gonna do? But there is one villain whose lack of screen time did actually hurt, and that's Tombstone. He holds Spider-Man over the cliff of a building, he has like one line, but he's ultimately and very quickly dealt with. Did Tombstone need a big role in this movie? No. Is the movie objectively worse because we barely got any Tombstone? No. But an issue I have is that if this is supposed to lay the groundwork for a more substantial appearance from the character, they should have done more to actually make him seem intimidating. But it's hard to take him seriously because he doesn't really seem like he's that big of a threat because of how quickly he's dealt with. If this is all we ever get of Lonnie, that will be a shame, but at least we got something from him in this movie. And the actor who plays him, Marvin Jones III, who also played him in Into the Spider-Verse, does a good job with what he's given. But it's possible they could be setting up Spider-Man 5 to be more crime-centric, because we hear that Spider-Man dealt with the Manfredi crime syndicate. So maybe in the next movie, there's going to be some type of effort from the crime underworld of New York to go after Spider-Man, which could be pretty cool. So let's talk about the big bad of the film. Let's finally talk about Jean Grey, who doesn't actually turn out to be the real villain. This was a very interesting way to introduce such an important X-Men character. One that's going to be one of the leading faces of the MCU going forward. Certain elements regarding this character work for me in this movie, but not everything. She's someone Bill Metzger of Damage Control is trying to put a stop to, as we see a mysterious presence control the minds of different people in the city, stealing a tank at one point and wreaking havoc. As the movie progresses, we see Jean do some pretty messed up stuff, like in that one scene where she takes control of MJ's body and she makes Peter think she remembers him, and she also kisses Peter. I really don't know if they took into account how this would impact the viewer's perception of Jean Grey, but yikes. There's also a sequence in the streets of New York where Jean is jumping from person to person, talking to Peter through different civilians. It's a cool sequence, but at one point, Jean mind controls a random guy, and she makes him walk into the street, and he gets struck by a car. That guy is dead. That guy is not breathing anymore. If you want us to sympathize with Jean Grey, and you want us to make us think she has a good heart, why would you make her do these things? I don't know. But as the film progresses, specifically after Spider-Man hands over Jean Grey to Damage Control, we learn about her past. We get a flashback of Jean and her sister Sarah when they're at a park, and they're using their telepathic abilities, just casually mind controlling a random person for no reason. But we hear about how their mother turned them away because of their abilities. And the way that Jean and her sister are treated in this movie lays some groundwork for the mutant saga, because it showcases how mutants are treated differently because of who they are. So I think that element was well done. But eventually we see Metzger and Damage Control kidnap Sarah, leaving Jean all alone. Obviously a lot of us knew that Sadie Sink was playing Jean Grey, so we could kind of guess that there was a twist coming and that she would be revealed to not be the main antagonist. But if I had no idea that Sadie was playing Jean, could I have seen this coming? I don't know. But when talking about Jean Grey in this movie, we also have to talk about the VMAX subplot. Jean spends the entire movie looking for something called VMAX, because at one point her sister Sarah telepathically reached Jean and communicated VMAX to her. So she's hoping that whatever VMAX is will lead her to her sister. And I actually like this twist. It reeled people in thinking it was going to be some crazy epic reveal, but the truth of what VMAX is actually a lot more unremarkable and sad. Jean's sister died at damage control, being pushed to her limits, and one of the last things she saw was a vent with some of the sticker peeled off. And I think all of this helps Jean be a more sympathetic character. Let's skip ahead and talk about the sequence where Jean experiences Peter's memory of Aunt May. Jean hears some kind words that May said to Peter after the events of Homecoming when she found out he was Spider-Man. May says, "The people who love you, we love you not because you're special, we love you because you're you." Jean gets to experience a type of kindness and acceptance that she never got from her mother. And we see how much that means to her. So I think this scene is actually really good. Because Jean went into Peter's memory and experienced that moment with Aunt May, I think that creates a unique personal connection between Peter and Jean. So overall, this is definitely a dark and sad origin they've decided to give Jean Grey in the MCU. And like I said, certain elements of this work, and to a degree I was able to sympathize with the character. But again, maybe you shouldn't have made her do some of these messed up things. But I do think we'll see Jean grow to be a more charismatic, heroic figure down the line. And hopefully we see her reflect on some of the bad stuff she does in this movie, because it would be really weird if she doesn't. Also, Sadie Sink is great in the role. She really helps you feel the weight of the tragic events that the character has gone through. And she helps make her feel like a real person. So let's talk about Ned and MJ's roles in this movie. Jacob Batalon and Zendaya provide some fun moments that help give you a similar feel to that of the previous movies. It's interesting how Peter becomes reacquainted with Ned and MJ. He follows Ned back to his apartment and there happens to be a party going on. And it's interesting because the whole reason why Peter chose to not tell Ned and MJ who he was at the end of No Way Home was because he wanted to stay out of their lives. He didn't want to put them in danger, and he wanted them to just move on without him. But throughout this movie, we see Ned and MJ get put in danger once again. And it's almost like he should have just told them the truth at the end of No Way Home to begin with. I like how obsessed Ned is with Spider-Man. He has a whole conspiracy corner where he's trying to connect all the dots as to who Spider-Man is, but he doesn't seem to be anywhere close. As his prime suspects are Flash Thompson and Mr. Harrington. I don't know how you get that far off base. But it got me thinking, does Ned subconsciously feel like something or someone is missing from his memory? And that's why he wants to figure out who Spider-Man is. I don't know. Something to think about. One of the scenes I really love in this movie is the scene where Peter, dressed as Spider-Man, builds Legos with Ned. We see Peter and Ned have great chemistry, they're nerding out, but in a way it's sad because Ned has no memory of his best friend. And I love how MJ draws Ned and Peter building Legos together. It's really the only picture that Peter has seen of him and his best friend in years. Overall, this is just a great scene. The way that things leave off with MJ and Peter in this movie is melancholic and it's really grounded. They don't get back together. There's no fairy tale ending here because MJ doesn't love Peter because she doesn't know who he is. And in the scene where MJ confronts Peter about his letter, Zendaya does a really good job. She's handling all these different emotions. She's trying to come to terms with the fact that she has someone very important to her removed from her memory, but she's also trying to lay Peter down without causing him any more pain. It didn't seem like MJ and Peter were ever going to get back together, but we do see MJ on a rooftop with her Black Dahlia pendant in her hand, which Peter gave her in Far From Home. So I think putting that in there kinda hints at the fact that they're probably going to get back together at some point. But on the other hand, exploring a different love interest in Spider-Man 5 could be pretty cool, maybe Black Cat. I don't know. But it leads me to a different point, which is I kind of want to see other supporting characters in Peter's life in the next movie. I like MJ and I like Ned, but it doesn't always have to be just about them. I get why they didn't do a lot of that in this movie, because in this movie Peter is very isolated. But hopefully going forward we do get a bit more of that. Maybe we see Harry, maybe we see Gwen, I don't know. But let's talk about the ending. Peter goes to introduce himself to Ned, and he starts the handshake, and Ned just knows it by muscle memory, and he repeats Peter's name back to him like he's had some type of revelation. Now, does this mean Ned remembers Peter? I don't know, probably not. Unless the spell is that fragile, I don't think so. He probably just feels like he's supposed to remember Peter, but he doesn't specifically know why. But this scene also plays into Peter's arc as he's once again embracing his Peter Parker side, and he's come to understand that even while being Spider-Man, it's okay to let people in and have relationships. And it's just a heartwarming, feel-good end to the movie. Let's talk a bit about Bill Metzger, played by Tramel Tillman. I like how he plays two sides of the character, and he's essentially putting on a facade for a chunk of the movie, hiding his true intentions. Tramel does a good job with the slight villainous turn the character has later on. Mark Ruffalo is also back as Bruce Banner, and I really enjoyed his part. Peter has some questions for him at ESU, and he seems pretty at peace, and he has some fun moments before his life is eventually ruined once again. It also seems pretty definitive that Banner knows Peter is Spider-Man, because when Peter goes to see him at ESU to learn if he can suppress a part of the arachnid's DNA expression, they talk about the potential of a universal inhibitor, and we see Peter eventually create that, and later on he tries to convince Banner to put it on, and he tells him it's universal, and Banner gives him a look. So that's cool. We get a new supporting character in this movie in Detective Jean DeWolf, played by Liza Colon-Zayas, and if you're like me, you know her as Tina from The Bear. In that show, she kinda plays a tough but kind maternal figure, and she kinda plays a similar role in this movie. She has a working relationship with Spider-Man, but she also has no idea who he is. And I enjoyed seeing their relationship develop throughout the movie to the point where Spider-Man actually remembers the names of her kids at the end. Yelena Belova, played by Florence Pugh, also has a small role in this movie. Spidey meets her at a very unique office location, which is a bathhouse, and the two have a fun scene. It's nothing crazy. Actually, it is. It is kinda crazy given some of the things they talk about. But anyway, Yelena is being pushed more and more by Marvel lately, which I don't mind at all, because I think she's one of the best post-Endgame characters, and Florence Pugh was pretty fun in the role. But let's finally talk about one of the best additions to the movie, Punisher, played by Jon Bernthal. Peter and Frank have great chemistry together in this movie. They have great comedic banter, and they've had a few run-ins already, as they reference Staten Island a couple of times. But we have no idea what actually happened there. All we know is that Spider-Man saved Frank, but if you ask Frank, he'll tell you something different. They fight on the same side, they might have similar goals at times, but their ways of doing things are completely different. And Peter warns Frank that he has to be careful because he's being too reckless, and we eventually see Frank's ways come back to bite him, because eventually he almost kills Peter. Frank shoots at Jean Grey, and Peter shields her and takes the bullet for her. Anyway, I like how we see a different side of Frank in the hospital scene. He's very remorseful over what he did. This scene got me. This is one of the most emotional scenes in the movie. You can tell that these two genuinely care about each other, despite the banter and despite how they go back and forth. And by the end, Frank is also one of the only people who knows what Spider-Man looks like behind the mask, so I think that's something that brings them closer together. Overall, Frank is a great addition to the movie, and I want to see these two team up once again. But when talking about the hospital scene, we also have to talk about what directly follows, and that's Peter sneaking out. And shit, man, this is a good scene. Being Spider-Man isn't something that Peter does for the glory. He does it because it's the right thing to do. A lot of the time, because of his duties as a hero and the sacrifices he has to make, things don't always go Peter's way. But in this scene, Peter is surrounded by people that love Spider-Man. You got people dressed as him, you got people with signs that they made. Being Spider-Man can often feel thankless, with life constantly beating you down, but it's not always thankless, and this scene shows it. Peter feels like a ghost in this movie, but Spider-Man is so celebrated, so there's an interesting contrast. And the kid doing the Spider-Man hand at Peter and him doing it back just makes the scene even better. And this scene also gives us one of the best comedic moments of the movie regarding Punisher, as he dresses up as Spider-Man and poses in the window, and I love how it cuts to him inside the room and he's just grunting to himself like a caveman. In terms of the pacing of the movie, I think it was pretty solid, but I do think they could have shaved off a couple of minutes, and maybe they could have dedicated some of that time to exploring some other things like Scorpion or Tombstone, or maybe they could have shown what Peter does for work, how he makes money. Does he make money? Who knows? But it's not a big deal. Also, I think this might be my favorite live action Spider-Man suit. It looks fantastic, it's so tangible, and I'm really glad they didn't CGI the hell out of it. The red on it is more vibrant and a deeper shade than ever before, which really makes it pop. It's such a quintessential Spider-Man suit. He's ripped right out of the comics. And there aren't any weird extra MCU lines as well. But let's talk about the post-credits scene of the movie. We see that the Spidey tracker gets a notification about a new Spider-Man sighting, but it's in space. And like many have suggested, I'm guessing it's Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, but who knows at this point. But whoever this is, I'm guessing they're gonna be in either Doomsday or Secret Wars. And whoever it is, I hope that they do the character justice and we get some cool moments, whether that's Toby or Andrew or whoever else. Overall, I think this is a great movie. I really enjoyed it even more the second time. It's got a lot of emotional, memorable moments that are worth doing a rewatch for. The character journey Peter goes on is great to see, and it's got some of the best, most dynamic action of the entire franchise. It explores fresh, new character dynamics, it packs a lot in, but manages to fit everything in a cohesive enough way. I'm excited for more. I want to see Peter's journey continue. Till you're 90, Tom. And get Destin back for Spider-Man 5. So tell me what you thought of Spider-Man Brand New Day in the comment section, and make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.